Tucker Carlson.
You're on! You're on! Thank you, Tucker. Great.
Sorry. Sorry, excuse me. I know you'll be surprised to learn that I was chatting up a storm backstage. I was just, the last thing I said was, I have no married daughters. You have 3 married, I have no married daughters. And Steve's like, come on, it's time to give the speech. Excuse me. Thank you so much. Sorry, I haven't, this is more people that live in the town that I occupy, so I haven't been around this many people in a long time, and it's just so nice. Human contact is great. Though I was, now normally when people give speeches, they always suck up to the people to whom they're speaking, and they particularly, go on about the place. It's so great here in Tempe. And I just met a bunch of people in the other room for pictures, and every single person I said, I really love Wisconsin. And by the end, I could hear myself. I thought, you sound like a fraud. But the truth is, I really do love Wisconsin. I'm not just saying that. I've been all over the state. I was here 2 weeks ago, bird hunting, and it's just the prettiest, for your grouse. Our grouse got blown out by a wet spring in Maine, so I came all the way to Wisconsin with my dogs and had the best time ever. But it's just, the 3 things I noticed about Wisconsin, the first thing I noticed is the natural beauty is just unbelievable. I share that with every resident of Illinois. We all love your state. You gotta build a wall. I mean, honestly. I'm sorry. One night, just really quick, about 20 years ago, it was my son's 6th birthday, and someone gave me tickets to a Bulls game in Chicago, and Michael Jordan was playing, and I thought, I'll take my son to the Bulls game. So we fly out to Chicago from Washington, where we then lived, and we go to this Bulls game, and there's a for real blizzard during the game. And the car I had ordered didn't show up. So we had to walk from wherever the Bulls arena is, probably sketchy part, well, Chicago, the whole place is sketchy, but back to the hotel, and I had no idea where we were, and it's driving snow. And like this I'll never forget it, this like pea green 1978 Pontiac pulls up, and this guy rolls down the window and he goes, "You guys need a ride?" And it was 4 drunk guys from Wisconsin. I'll never forget this as long as I live. And I know I'm not endorsing this, by the way, for the record, but I mean, they were deep into the coffee brandy, for real. And we slid and did 360s as they laughed all the way back to the hotel. There were no cars on the road, just the 4 guys from Wisconsin. And I always mention that to my son. I'm like, they are just hearty, nice people. So that's the first thing I noticed. The second thing I noticed is every town in Wisconsin I've been to most towns in Wisconsin, has a bar. Every town, doesn't matter how small. Yes. And people, more than one usually. And, people make fun of that, and it's all Germans, all they do is drink. Okay, got it. But there's something kind of wonderful about that. And I don't even drink, just for the record, anymore. So I'm not endorsing drinking, okay? But that is like the community center, effectively, in these towns. And I live in a very rural area with no bars. And people just sit at home and drink. And, same level of drinking, probably a little higher drinking level in Maine than in Wisconsin. But in Wisconsin, people get together to do it. And in the summertime, they tie all their boats together in the lake. It's an inherently friendly, social place. And I just love that. And the third thing I noticed about Wisconsin, and it's more a mystery than an observation, is I do not understand the politics of Wisconsin at all. It's the most, I just met your former governor. The first thing I asked, how do you govern this state? I mean, I don't understand it at all. In the places I'm in Wisconsin, and again, it's mostly for hunting and fishing, exclusively for hunting and fishing, I've never met anyone I disagreed with. Ever. I spent a week in Appleton once. I spent another 4 days in Sheboygan another time. And I never met a single person I disagreed with on anything. And then and then Tammy Baldwin gets elected to the Senate. And then Ron Johnson gets elected also to the Senate, also in a statewide race. What? It's amazing. I think about that a lot. Anyway, thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful to be here. So I'm actually going to spend most of the evening in a Q&A with Brett because I'm a compulsive talker. I tend to be discursive and go off into weird directions, and he's an intellectual and a very focused man and a deep man, and he's gonna keep me on point. But just a couple super quick observations about where I think we're going, because I'm obsessed with them, and the short answer is I'm not exactly sure where we're going, but buckle up. Everyone can feel it. Everyone can feel that we're in a moment of volatility that's about to accelerate. And a lot of people who share my views about the world are confused about what exactly is driving this and where we're going. I can't answer either one of those questions, but I would just make the obvious observation that whatever's happening is a little deeper than a political trend. You're seeing outcomes in races and, as we saw yesterday, in ballot initiatives that you would never have predicted and that don't seem to make any sense at all as a pure political calculation. What happened yesterday in Ohio, I've been brooding about for the last 20 hours. It was really sort of hard to make sense of that. You know, how a state like Ohio, I feel like I know it pretty well. I covered politics for over 20 years on the road. And so, of course, you wind up in Ohio, and it's a wonderful place. Not quite as pretty as Wisconsin, but a nice place and nice people in a similar Midwestern way. How they could vote for something like that overwhelmingly does make you wonder. And so here's my thinking on this right now, and I doubt many people in the room will applaud me as I say this, but I mean it. What happened yesterday in the constitutional amendment that was just added to the Ohio Constitution, which, and I should say at the outset that I think there are good people on both sides of the abortion debate, because I know them. I have one view, which is a pro-life view, strongly. But I also know people who disagree with me, who I admire as people, who I think are decent people, and we just disagree. But the initiative that passed yesterday overwhelmingly is radical. It's just radical. It allows termination of the pregnancy until birth. And there's a lot of lying about this, but I read the text of it today, and that's exactly what it says. And it's enshrined in a constitutional amendment. So, and it didn't squeak by. It passed overwhelmingly. And if you break down who voted for it, basically a majority of every category did. But the strongest category, were obviously Democrats, but immigrants voted for it overwhelmingly, by 20 points more than native-born. That shocked me. And it made me wonder if some of the core assumptions that I have about politics might not be wrong. So my view for the last 5 or 6 years has been it's not really a contest between Republicans and Democrats. That's there's something a little fake about that. A lot of the Republicans in Washington don't represent my views, that's for certain. And it's not because I'm secretly liberal, it's because they are. And so I think you know what I'm talking about. Here in Wisconsin, I think you do. So there's a lot of fraudulence at the level of elected representative, and we see it, and it's gravely frustrating. So about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I decided to really try to stop using the language of the past when I described political debates, and rather than saying it's Democrats doing this, Republicans doing that, or even it's liberals and conservatives, categories that are becoming harder and harder to define, I decided on it's normal people versus everybody else. It's normal people. It's like people that I know who maybe aren't very political, certainly not very ideological, but want the things that every normal person wants, which is peace, tranquility, safety, some attention on them and their concerns. They get none. And a better life for their kids. I mean, these aren't kind of partisan categories. This is just like normal people versus the people in charge. That's the way that I viewed it. And to some extent, I still think that. I still think if you were to ask your average person, what are the things that you care about, they would bear, and the public opinion polling proves this, those issues would bear almost no relation to the issues that, say, occupy the time of the U.S. Senate. Like, they're interested in a whole bunch of issues that most people have at, like, number 14 and 15 on their list of concerns. And I spent 35 years in Washington, and I never heard one person in the Congress talk about gas prices or food inflation, not one. And where I live, those are real issues. If your grocery bill doubles in 18 months, that's kind of a concern, maybe an even bigger concern than what happens in Ukraine. I'm just saying. And again, that's an issue on which I think good people can disagree. I have friends who strongly disagree with my views on Ukraine. I'm not going to lecture you about them. But no matter how strongly you feel about what's happening in Ukraine, I think you can concede, if you read the polling, that most people don't put that in the top 10 of their concerns. But everybody in Washington does. So my view all these years has been, let's just bring a little democracy back into the democracy, pay a little bit of attention to what people want. You don't have to take a poll on everything. There's certainly a place for your representatives to act out of conscience or conviction, to take a stand against what's popular at the moment. I respect that. I try to do that myself, just as a commenter on politics. But over time, if you're going to have a democracy, it should reflect what people want, broadly speaking. Not everything they want, but like, if they're not getting anything they want, then it's not really a democracy. That has been my view. And I would say right about now, people are getting right about 0% in that range of what they really want. And that's infuriating. But then I see the results last night, and I think to myself, I know a lot of, not a lot, but I know some totally decent pro-choice people. I don't know any of them who would be like, hey, let's have this until the moment of birth. I mean, I don't think anybody really thinks that's a good idea. And yet people are voting for it. Now, why? I personally think it's a theological question. I mean, I think there is a spirit of evil afoot, just my view. And I'm hardly some radical evangelical, but I can't think of another explanation. But it almost doesn't matter what the explanation is. The truth is the overwhelming majority in a red state, a Republican state, just voted for this. So on one level, here's the bad news. I'll get to the good news very quickly. On one level, it may be that normal people are shrinking in number. I mean, I'm trying to be reality-based here. So Republicans have won the majority of the electorate in the last 5 elections precisely one time. Presidential elections. And there are a lot of reasons that demographic change is the main reason. There are probably others. But the fact remains that people with my views are not in the overwhelming majority. There's not. I wish they were, they're not. So that's a big thing to digest if you're me, and probably if you're you, because the assumption has always been that like there's a small group of wackos subverting everything and acting against the will of the people, which I still believe. But I also think the will of the people is not always right. I mean, if they're voting overwhelmingly for abortion till birth, I mean, when I started in this business covering politics in 1991, 32 years ago, the head of NARAL wasn't for that. I mean, nobody was for that. Not one person was for that. Because that's crazy. That's infanticide. That's not, the girl who gets raped by her uncle in the first trimester. I get it. Okay, fine. I disagree, but I get it. That's 9 months. You ever seen a birth? You don't need to be I'm an Episcopalian, just for the record. You don't need to be some crazed, snake-handling Baptist preacher from Alabama to be like, no, we're not doing that. Because there's no way around it. That's murder, period. And yet they just voted for it. So my intent is not to be depressing or attack voters or whatever. My intent is to give hope, and here's the hope. So people who have traditional, non-sectarian, of all religions, but just kind of traditional American views. Hey, let's put the interest of the country and the people who live here first. Certainly not eighth. Let's kind of pay attention to what people want. Let's not actively work to destroy the family. Let's recognize that children, wherever you are in abortion, children really are the greatest thing that people produce. They're really the only thing of value that people produce. Sorry. And that without them, we end. They are the greatest gift. It's not a right-wing sentiment. That's the most basic of all human sentiments. You measure your wealth by your children. What culture hasn't thought that? Every culture's thought that. Every culture's thought that. And we no longer do. Well, we do, but a huge number of people don't. And so where does that leave us? People who have what were 30 years ago very normal views, ordinary views, almost universal views in this country. Well, it leaves us in the minority. And I think that's just true. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Because the truth is, in modern America, energized minority groups, and I don't mean racial minority at all, I mean people with views that are not commonly held by everybody else, actually seem to have the most power. They actually seem to have the most power. And I've thought about this for decades as I watched legislation work its way through Congress and presidents make various decisions. And so often I noticed that what the president or what the Congress, either one of them was doing, was really at the behest of like 2% of the population or 10% of the population or 15% of the population. Because organized groups of people with intensely held views are much more effective than a broad, soft majority or plurality of the country who just assumes everyone agrees with them, if you're following me. So I watched after, and not to relitigate the Iraq War, but I happened to be there for the whole thing, including in Iraq. And I'll never forget standing on the White House lawn. I just interviewed Bush, and this was in late 2001. Of course, we had lived through 9/11. It completely changed the country, and there was this deep reservoir of goodwill between Americans. We were all in this together, which was a beautiful thing to watch, as you recall, if you can remember that time. But there was also this sense that we need to do something about this. And I remember walking across the White House lawn with a friend of mine who was a reporter, very smart, one of the few smart reporters in the world, and still my friend. And I remember saying, they just told me that we're going to invade Iraq, but that has nothing to do with 9/11. I mean, whatever, there's nothing to do with 9/11. They're not really going to do that, right? And he goes, oh, no, they're going to do it. And I was like, why would they do that? You know, I was just confused. I didn't even have a view on it, but that doesn't make any, it's a non sequitur. Do you know what I mean? It's like you get in a car crash in Belgium and sue the Vatican City. It's like had nothing to do with each other. So he was like, well, because there's a small group of people who want it. Now they're called the neoconservatives, but it's the defense intellectuals in Washington, a lot of whom I knew and were friends of mine, and they want this, and they're pushing it, and they're going to get it, and they, push Cheney into this, and we're getting there. And I thought, well, that's kind of amazing, how a small group of people can have a view that most other people don't share, but through single-minded intensity can make sure that their will is done. I thought that's kind of an interesting model, and I kind of tucked it away in my head, and then I woke up about 6 years ago, and all of a sudden people are lecturing me about pronouns. And I thought to myself, at first I just thought, well, that's like so ridiculous. It's going nowhere. What's my pronoun? Now, look at me. What do you think my pronoun is? What are you, numb? Come on. I'm a dude. And you know that. So why are you hassling me about my pronoun? And of course, the reason they were doing that was to sow doubt in the minds of every person who speaks English that there is such a thing as a gender binary, that these categories are even legitimate. It was an op based in common English usage, and that's where they all start, designed to change the majority's view about something that had really never been questioned, and that is that there are two sexes, male and female, really throughout history, never been questioned. And now it is. And I remember thinking to myself, well, that can't work, because the percentage of people who think there are like 1,500 different gender categories and that two-spirit is even a thing, or whatever they're telling you on Facebook, like they're obviously mentally ill, but they're not in the majority. In fact, they're in a tiny, tiny minority. And, several years later, I look in horror, but also in awe at how far they've gotten. A tiny group of people acting out of motives, I can only guess at, and I'm not going to lecture you about, but it's true, a tiny group of people changed the entire country's language. There's now on my passport. I just saw this the other day. I was standing in a line. I opened my passport, gender, male, female, other. Well, there is no other, okay? But they literally convinced the State Department to change the U.S. passport to reflect this lie that they're telling us that everybody knows is a lie. That's incredible. And I think conservatives have spent most of the time being like, well, I'm never going to accept this. Well, it actually kind of doesn't matter whether you accept it. The State Department just changed the passports. How'd they do that? That is worth thinking about as we proceed in a world that is hostile to us. It is. And by us, I mean it in the broadest possible way, us. I don't mean necessarily people who look like me. I'm saying people who want to live the kind of life that we lived growing up in America. We live in a safe community that cares about kids, cares about their education, cares about their mental health, cares about their physical health. doesn't think that, sticking them online for 15 hours a day is a good idea. Get out and play. Just like normal stuff. The people who have those views are now a minority. That's just true. So rather than whine about it, it seems to me it might be useful if conservatives made a major change in the way they see the rest of the world and see themselves for what they really are, which is not the sleeping majority that someday is going to rise up and bring us back to 1985, but instead a determined and clear-thinking minority of people who truly believe that the life they want for their kids is the best life, who have an actual argument to make about it, and who aren't kidding. Who weren't kidding at all. And almost none of them are like that. And up until recently, the only person I've ever met who was actually like that is my brother. And I won't get into the whole eccentric history of my family, but I will say that I spent my whole life living next to my brother. He was my only brother and my best friend. A wonderful person, smarter than I am, a little crazy. And actually, it turns out not at all crazy. So my brother and I sent our children to the same school, and it was this, because we're Episcopalians, a little Episcopal day school in Washington, which was kind of like mildly liberal and like, let's celebrate Martin Luther King Day way. Fine. I actually kind of buy all the Dr. Seuss, we're all the same under the skin stuff. Great, perfect. That like all schools like that, like all institutions like that, became insane, poisonous, and dangerous, and actually like wrecked the lives of all the kids who went there. And I'm sure if you send your kids to a private Protestant day school, you know what I'm talking about. Like, it's actually became really evil. And my brother was the only person in the entire school, the only parent who, one, recognized what was going on, and two, said something about it. And my brother would go up to the headmaster, you pull up with your kid's carpool line, the dopey headmaster would be standing there. This kind of genderless loser who was paying himself $700,000 a year. You know the kind I'm talking about, totally passive-aggressive, who actually was trans, but I didn't realize it at the time, but whatever. Anyway, really truly an evil man, but kind of like hiding in that weird way they do behind the veil of sensitivity. Well, I don't think it's really sensitive. Okay. No sensitivity at all toward your feelings or your kid's life at all. But anyway, my brother would confront the guy in front of all the Range Rover moms dropping off their kids. And my brother would be like, wait, what? That's insane. Like, you can't attack white people in the school. Like, that's my son's white. Like, what are you doing? And all the moms hated him for it. That was the interesting thing. And they weren't like liberals, by the way. My brother would just be saying things are like very obvious 20 years ago. You can't attack people for the color of their skin because they don't choose the color of their skin. Period. Like, that is the message of Martin Luther King. And by the way, there's a monument to him on the National Mall. Dr. Seuss wrote like 15 books about it, okay? And that really was the agreement we had. You can't attack people on the basis of characteristics that are immutable, that they can't change because they're not the product of those person's choices. God did that. And so we're all equal before God. You can't attack people on the basis of their race, especially out loud in a school. What are you doing, you freak? Which is 100% right. That's 100% right. And if you have kids in private school or public school, they're attacking them on the basis of their race. And no parent had the stones to say word one about it. Because if you complain about their racism, you're a racist. What? No, you're insane. That's a lie. You're the racist, and I demand right now that you stop it. And my brother is the only person who would do that. And I'll never forget feeling slightly embarrassed as I looked at the carpool moms in their Range Rovers who just wanted to get, to Soul Cycle and then Starbucks. And the rage, like, how dare he? He's making a scene, and why can't, Buckley Carlson just be quiet? He's always got an opinion. And as I got older, and as my kids got older, graduated from that school and told me, like, I can't believe you sent us to that school. It was, like, awful. It was awful. And none of our classmates did well. They didn't do well at all because they were broken inside by the attacks from the school on them. Like, what does it do to a kid to hear that? What does it do to a kid? It hurts them. And if you don't believe me, look at the suicide rate. It's the #1 cause of death for people under 45 right now. How'd that happen? I'm serious. And their answer was always, oh, well, you just need more, go to the nurse's office, we'll get you some more pharmaceuticals. Have you had enough Adderall today? How about some SSRIs? That was literally their answer. It was grotesque. And again, I just want to say, my brother was the only person who spoke up that I ever saw in the 11 years or whatever I forced my children to go to this re-education camp. And I thought, if we're going to make any headway at all, we've got to be my brother. We've got to be the guy who's just like, I'm sorry if it makes me unpopular with the Range Rover moms. This is my kid. And my sacred duty, my most sacred duty, is to protect that child. And I don't care if it makes me unpopular, or NBC News calls me an extremist, or if the ladies down the street whisper when I walk by like I'm the freak. I'm not the freak, you're the freak. You're the freak. Are you joking? And it's that kind of clear thinking and that kind of moral certainty that makes movements effective. You know what does not make movements effective? Just sending a lot of money to a bunch of people who don't actually agree with you, okay? That doesn't work. They lie to you, and especially, I will say, and this comes out of deep personal knowledge, especially if you're what we call a social conservative, which would have been just like a totally moderate, normal person in 1985, like a Presbyterian. Those people are now scary. Yeah, okay. As someone who is like legitimately moderate just by temperament, I'm not interested at all in fighting about politics in my personal life at all. I never do. If they're calling me an extremist, me, then that means the word has no meaning. It has zero meaning. And if you're intimidated by it, that's on you. And you're never going to get anywhere. That's how a state like Ohio can have an election result like yesterday's. Because all the normal people, even the normal pro-choice people, who should have been like, well, yeah, okay, girl raped by her uncle, I get it, but 9 months? What are you, insane? That's infanticide. Like, what? Bill Clinton would never have signed. Like, what are you even talking about? Nobody said that. Because they were all intimidated. And not just on that, on every issue. People who truly think they're God, which is this, and that's the most immoral category of person. It's not a question of Christians and Jews or Muslims. No, the divide is really simple. People who think they're God and people who know they're not. Okay? That's the divide. And anyone who thinks he's God is scary and a threat to you because there are no limits to what that person will do. And it's those people who have the least moral authority of any people in the world. People who imagine they're God and omnipotent, can change the weather and your gender. People who are literally insane are the ones who've seized the moral high ground because the rest of us don't want to be unpopular in carpool line. So I actually think it's on us. I actually think if you want to succeed, the number one thing you can do, and hopefully you can do it unlike me, smiling, is say no. No, we're not doing that. Sorry, not doing that, because that's crazy. And I kind of don't care what you think. And by the way, that is the most basic job of a parent, is to say no. And when you say no to your kids, Dad, do you mind if I smoke weed at the breakfast table? No. Can't do that, sorry. That's just not allowed here. Why? Nah, it's not allowed. Shh, not allowed. No. That is not simply something that happens. That is the thing that happens in a functioning family. That's the thing. You say no without embarrassment, without guilt, because it's your job. Because the health of your kids depends upon that. Setting limits is your duty. And yet we set no limits on the way bureaucrats, teachers, politicians, our neighbors treat our children. No limits at all. The last thing I'll say, which is I've never gotten over this as long as I have, in the last 10 years, nothing has shocked me more. When I was a kid, there was like, and I'm only, 54, only 54, close to death, older. But, if you're in your mid-50s, you don't feel that old. No knee replacements yet. And you can sort of lie to yourself and feel like, 1985 was just yesterday. It wasn't almost 40 years ago. Anyway, But in the America that I grew up in, which doesn't seem like an antique country, I mean, we had like color photography and air conditioning and air travel, and we had it all. The red line was doing creepy sex stuff with other people's kids. It was absolutely the red line. Like, absolutely red line. Like, you get shot for that, and rightly so. If your fifth grader was walking through the park and some guy's like, hey, little boy, let's talk about sex. I mean, like, that guy would be arrested immediately if you didn't kill him first. So it has blown my mind, and thankfully my children are older, but it has blown my mind to watch the passive response, which is really to say the evil response of parents across the country as their children are sexualized in school. Little prepubescent kids. We're going to talk about gender. No, you're talking creepy sex stuff with my kids. Stop now, I'm going to hurt you. And I mean it, physically. I'm going to hurt you. Like, why wouldn't I? They're my kids. If we'll tolerate that, and I don't mean to complain to a school board. Why? I don't like what's going on. Oh, if you're literally complaining to the school board about that, you've already lost. They've trapped you in the bureaucratic tar baby, and you're never going to win. Wait your turn. You're doing creepy sex stuff with my kid. You know what I mean? If we've lost the ability to act instantly and decisively in the face of creepy sex stuff with our kids, then we probably don't deserve to hold on to our civilization. It's kind of that simple. And, oh, he's advocating for violence. Yeah, I am. I'm just going to say that. Creepy sex stuff with my kids gets a violent response. If the authorities won't respond, I will. That's my moral duty. I don't know what else to say. And if I had said that in 1985, people are like, well, yeah, of course. I mean, that's like not even a question. First of all, no one would ever do that. Only some wino in the park would do that. But now, it's the school nurse. Literally, the school nurse is doing that, and no one's saying anything. So I'll just stop with this, and we'll get to the much more edifying part of the program with Brett. When I say that kind of stuff will stop, it will all stop when normal people, even and maybe especially if they're in the minority, say, I have zero tolerance for that. None. And I'm just going to be what, by the way, what's your state animal? Right. Try that crap with a badger. It bites your fingers off. You act like a badger in the face of that? Oh, do I seem unreasonable? Because I am. Want to see my teeth? Here they are. I mean it. Not only does that work, that's all that works. Thank you.
As Tucker mentioned, we're going to switch to the Q&A part of the program here. He's looking forward to it. I think you can tell he's very excitable and ready to take your questions. We have volunteers going down through the aisles picking up your cards. You should have been given a card to write down your questions, so please hand them to your volunteers. Can I do one thing real quick before we go? Mom, Dad, where are you? Right there. Remember, Pops, when you suggested I become an actuary way back when? Do you think an actuary might? The poli-sci degree worked out kind of okay? Actually, I'm kidding.
Did he really suggest that?
Yeah. I'm kidding, though. If any of your children or grandchildren are thinking about poli-sci as a degree, come have them talk to me, and I will set them straight, all right? We don't want any of those walking around. So can we follow up first with Tuesday's elections?
Yes.
You talked about Ohio. Can you walk through some of the other results and what you think they mean for the conservative movements in 2024?
I don't know. I mean, I'm just going to be totally honest with you. I focused on Ohio and Virginia because the porn lady lost, by the way, thank heaven. I'm sorry. Come on now. You can't. The purpose of American politics can't be to degrade the country, okay? If that becomes the purpose, then we're in even deeper trouble.
It was close, though.
It was very close. It was less than 1 point. I'm not sure I can draw from the data that I have just from the last 24 hours broad national conclusions. I've been pretty focused, I will say, on the presidential race and the primary, and I'm just amazed by the numbers there. I'm amazed, especially when you break them out. Trump is winning among black men against Biden. Like, what? And I have to say, this doesn't really mean anything, but it's just interesting. That's the thing that conservatives have been talking about, like conservative activist types for like all these years, and you're like, please stop. But it's actually happening. It's unbelievable. I was completely wrong. I'm amazed. In the gender breakdown, that is like what I am really struck by more than anything in the polling in the last 10 years, really. It's not, the racial differences are what we talk about endlessly, unfortunately. It's not that interesting to me. We never talk about the gender differences. The difference between married and unmarried women, I mean, the Democratic Party is the party of unmarried women. It's weak men, unhappy women, okay? And that shouldn't surprise you because actually weak men create unhappy women, in case you haven't noticed. And so the party is kind of dedicated to that, emasculating the men and harnessing the rage of their disappointed women. And that's true, and has done that quite effectively. But on the other side, like people who are married and have happy relationships tend to kind of vote the same way, and they don't vote for Joe Biden. So that's the real divide. Just saying.
When you look at abortion and what it seems to be in importance in some of these elections, how does that bode well for 2024? The polling that you just mentioned with Trump doing well with unusual.
Well, it's been
groups.
very effective. I mean, abortion's been very effective for the Democrats. I find it, so disheartening because the debate just having, it's weird to have had roughly the same job for my whole life, literally since, the day I left college. I've been doing pretty much what I'm doing now. So I've seen this longitudinally, and the level of extremism on the other side is like gone beyond what I ever thought it would be. I mean, at this point, it's just like throw them into the fire for Moloch. I mean, it's just like, it's crazy. Whereas, for the bulk of my life, it was very, very muted and restrained. It was sort of like the gun control debate. I mean, no one ever says, we're just going to take your guns away. They're like, no, we just want background checks. And by the way, it's not a national gun registry. Calm down, conspiracy nut. And then you sort of know where that's going to end, which is the ATF is here for you now. And because I just saw it in the abortion debate. It's just unbelievable. Now they're just like, yeah, you can't, whatever. So yes, it's been very effective, and Trump is not strong on that issue from my perspective at all. Trump is going to be the nominee, obviously. He's at like 61%. I'll just say one quick thing about that. I mean, I think that has a lot to do with two things. One is Trump's fundamental strength is that he has deep and real affection for voters. That's just real. I've spent a lot of time around it, and you can't fake that, and he's not a robot, and Trump voters will forgive him almost anything because they know that on some real level he likes them. If you've never seen the tape of Trump at a McDonald's, I mean, it just tells you everything. I mean it. Trump goes into McDonald's, you just can't fake that. I've been with so many politicians when they're like, going to some town, oh, they have cheesesteaks here. It's my favorite kind of, what is it called? Cheesesteak. And they eat the local, or, in Wisconsin, it's something horrible fried, fried Snickers bar or whatever, and they're like coughing it into their palm, or, you know what I mean? But you have this, the Iowa State Fair is a staple of this. There's always the famous pictures of them eating hot dogs without, trying to look naughty or whatever. It's all very painful to watch. Trump going into McDonald's is like it's the prodigal son coming home. It's unbelievable. They're slaying the fattened calf for him and putting it in a quarter pounder, and he just knows everything about the menu. He really means it. He's got very strong feelings about it. He'd be like, the quarter pounder kind of gets short shrift. Everyone's like, oh, Big Mac, it's got 2 patties, but actually the quarter pounder is more meat. It's the forgotten sandwich. What percentage of your sales are quarter pounders? I always get a quarter pounder. And then they'll like, expertly, like men used to roll cigarettes with one hand, like put his finger in the center of it to fold it, and then insert the whole thing, and talk while he's eating. It's so real. And that is, I'm not even a McDonald's eater. I have my own problems, but that's not one of them. But I watch that and I'm like, I love you because you love the country in all its sort of slightly dopey, overweight awkwardness and cheerfulness and warm-heartedness that really is America, and it's certainly Wisconsin. And it's described Wisconsin. I mean, it's the best. And sort of lack of self-consciousness. Like, I'm not embarrassed to admit I eat McDonald's. I love McDonald's. Are you kidding? All the dipping sauces and stuff, even the weird, like the seasonal ones you only get 4 months a year, like I love those. There's something about that. So that's his first strength that's fundamental. It'll never change. And the second is the fact that he's been indicted 4 times. And he's facing life in prison for things that aren't crimes. It's insane. And the more you know about the details of the cases against Trump, the more you're like, I'm going to send the guy money. There are things about him I don't like. I speak for myself. I don't agree with him on everything. He's definitely not as conservative as I am, that's for sure. On the other hand, we can't allow this. You cannot allow a sitting president to use a legal system that he did not build, that our ancestors built. It was the fairest in the world. By far, nothing came close to the U.S. justice system. And I mean nothing. Would you rather be tried for a murder in Italy or the United States? I mean, even in Europe, we're the fairest, by far, including Great Britain. And he's destroying it in order to stop his chief rival, who's beating him in the polls. Like, you just can't allow that. And I don't care what your concerns are about Trump, that's more important. And by the way, if they do try to send him to prison, I'm sending him money. I've never sent money to a politician in my life. I'm sending him money. So, and I think a lot of people feel as I do.
So you do think, even given the challenges that he faces legal-wise and otherwise, he has a legitimate chance of winning in 2024?
I mean, I think he's certain to win the primary. I mean, look, I shouldn't say certain. It's a year from this week, as you know. And things have accelerated and moved in directions that I never would have anticipated globally. America's position globally is a lot different from what most people in this country think it is. A lot different. It's so much diminished that you just can't even imagine. And if you haven't been abroad recently, I went to like 5 continents this summer to get a sense of it. I've been stuck in a studio for 15 years. I wanted to see what the rest of the world was talking about. And I was really stunned by how far American power and prestige have fallen. I think it's possible that something truly crazy happens. I think it's totally possible that Joe Biden's not the nominee. So many things could happen. But I think Trump is likely to win the Republican primary, and I think Trump is, as of right now, the favorite to win the presidency. I just don't think Democrats are going to stand for that. I just don't think that at all. I mean, I've never really figured out why they hate Trump so much. You know, he's not an ideological right-winger, actually. He's conservative, he's very pro-America, but he's certainly not a radical. He's very moderate. I mean, if you took the brand name off, you would think this guy's just like a very moderate, he could be a moderate Democrat. I mean, I always contrast him in my mind with Obama. I do think it's stylistic. Obama changed the country and hurt the country in ways that I don't think we can even fully understand. Obama truly hated the country and hated the people who live here. Obama is a racist, Obama is an angry man, and Obama used his power over 2 terms to hurt America, period. So it's the most radical administration that we'd ever had up until that point, but Obama himself was such a master of communication and only spoke in the "this is your captain" speaking voice. This is your captain, there's a little light chop ahead. You just buckle up if you would, not a big deal. Everything will be okay. And you're like, I'm glad he's flying the plane. Trump could read the phone book and scare the crap out of you. Because he just seems like, he's orange, he's loud, But if you just read their programs, you'd be like, this guy is full-blown moderate. This guy's a freaking wacko. If you see what I'm saying. So,
do you think Biden is the nominee?
I don't. I think they hate Trump. I really think they hate Trump because they can't control what he might say. Trump really didn't do anything that is actually, I mean, if we stop lying about it, he didn't put people in cages. It was all a lie. January 6th was a total lie. I mean, it was not an insurrection. It was ridiculous. The whole thing is a lie. So Trump's crime, and the reason that he's hated as the devil hates holy water in Washington, is because he's the kind of person who just might tell the truth about something accidentally and scares the hell out of them, okay? So they really do hate him, and they really do fear him. That is absolutely real. It's demonstrable, right? So, and Joe Biden inspires no personal loyalty. There's not a cult of Joe Biden. He's not, you know what I mean? He's not Bobby Kennedy or something, or 50 years later, people are like, I worked for Joe Biden. No one brags about working for Joe Biden. He's a mannequin. Right, it's a total put up. I mean, everyone gets this now, right? And so the second he's not useful, he'll be replaced. I mean, and by the way, you saw Bill Kristol, whom I worked for many years, who's now an ardent leftist, and David Axelrod, who was the main consigliere for Obama from his days in Chicago as a state senator, both came out 2 days ago, Monday, after the New York Times poll over the weekend showing that Biden was losing to Donald Trump, and said, time to get rid of Biden. And I do think that will happen. I mean, by the way, he's not obviously not fit to serve anyway. This whole thing, and speaking just one thing I'll say, just going back to the example of my beloved, mildly lunatic brother, is that my brother's great genius, and the reason that he is smarter than I am, is that he's a little bit like your dog. Like, he doesn't listen so much. My dogs can't speak English, but they know exactly what I want and what I'm about to do because they watch me. They turn the sound down and just watch. And so the obvious is very obvious to my dogs and to my brother. And so, like, if you're trying to hurt my kids, I don't care what you're saying, you're hurting my kids. And I'm not going to put up with it. Right? Period. So I think if you take 3 steps back, you realize, like, this guy should not be the president. Like, they put a senile guy in charge of the United States of America. That's insane. And they're demanding that we play along with it. Like, oh, Joe Biden's the president. Joe Biden's not the president. I'm not being mean. And a lot of us are hampered by our innate politeness and our reverence for older people and the deep sadness we feel when we watch someone who's cognitively impaired, someone with Alzheimer's or any form of dementia or decline. It's so sad, and decent people feel that sadness. I feel it when I see Joe Biden. I feel sorry for Joe Biden, and it restrains me. But what I should be saying is I will never stop feeling sorry for Joe Biden, and I will never stop despising his wife, who did this. But that's kind of secondary to the fact that this is my country, or my family's been here for hundreds of years. I have 4 children here. I have no other passport. I'm not leaving, and you're wrecking it. And you are not fit to be president of my country. And it's totally outrageous that a small group of Democratic operatives put this guy in there because they didn't want Bernie Sanders criticizing the banks, and Mayor Pete Buttigieg was just too repulsive to be president. And so they're like, oh, Joe Biden's there. He'll do exactly what we say. This is a total op. We're the victims of it, and we haven't said word one about it. It's like Joe Biden. Let me stop you right there. Joe Biden is senile. He should not be our president. Shame on you for playing along with the most obvious lie ever perpetrated on the American people. Shame on you. George Stephanopoulos or whatever professional liars out there trying to get you to genuflect or show respect to a guy who should not be our president. It's prima facie outrageous. I don't need to hear your dumb argument. There's no argument. The guy's senile. Watch him. You are a criminal for putting that guy in that office. And by the way, you did cheat in the election, and everybody knows it.
Stay on presidential politics.
Okay.
Clay and Buck spoke with Trump today and asked if he would consider you as vice president. Would you serve if asked?
I always think in as I spent my life in the news/entertainment business, I always think of, the famous line when the, actress is getting her Oscar for Best Actress in some stupid remake, and she's like, what I really want to do is direct. Slow down, honey. You're a great actress. You just won the Oscar. In fact, you're the best actress, according to the Academy. Maybe you should stick with acting. And I do think, and I say this to my children all the time, and I try not to use profanity, but sometimes I do, stay in your freaking lane. I always say that. Stay in your lane. The greatest lie that we tell children is you can be whatever you want to be. No, you can't. You cannot be whatever you want to be. That's a cruel thing to tell kids. The key to happiness and productivity and success is to assess as clearly as you possibly can in yourself your inherent, innate, inborn strengths, the gifts that God gave you, or the Big Bang gave you, or whatever your theology is, but the ones you're born with, that's real. Anyone who has dogs or children does not deny the existence of genetics, okay? I met people tonight, and I met these people, I was like, whoa, you all look alike. Oh, you're related. Our talents are mostly inborn. In fact, I would say almost all our talents are inborn, period, okay? And we can choose to become more proficient at certain things through practice and discipline. That's essential. No one is born, a chess master. You learn it. But without the basic ingredients, you will never become a chess master. Okay? In that case, it's IQ or it's a certain kind of strategic thinking or whatever. But that's true for every skill. And I found out totally by accident when I got married without a college degree and couldn't get a job, and I went into journalism because my dad was in journalism. He's like, they'll hire anybody. You should do that. And so I did, and I found out the first week, I was like, oh, I kind of like this, which is usually a sign that you're good at something. It was writing. I like to write. Actually, I hate to write, but it comes easily to me. So that's all I've done my whole life. And a number of times people have been, well, you're good at this. You should do something else. Okay. You're a great electrician. Maybe you should become a watercolorist. Yeah. Nope. I'm not kind of going to stick with the 110, 220 world. Okay. I'm more fluent there. So I just, in general, and people who work for me hear this lecture all the time, figure out what you're good at and do that, period, and stay doing that. And if you continue to do that, if you continue to accentuate your natural gifts and don't waste any time on things you're not good at, you will be successful. The amount of time I spend doing things I'm not good at, 0. And I'm like so autistic about it that it's really helped me. I'm just like, I'm not gonna do that. Golf. You know what golf is? It's like a sport outside. I'm not good at it. I'm left-handed, I'm dyslexic, I'm just not good at golf. I don't play I'm not against golf. You'll never see me golfing. And so I kind of feel that way about politics. I've never been elected to anything. I've never run for anything. Are you joking? I'm like obviously kind of insane. I mean, do you think someone's gonna vote for me? I think I'll stay commenting on things.
So back to the Democrat Party. If not Biden, who? VP Harris, Gavin Newsom?
Well, obviously they're not going to pick Kamala Harris. That would be amazing. And I'm praying for it. I really am. I mean, she's just amazing. She was like made in a lab. I mean, it's just incredible. She's everything. She's African American, but actually she's South Asian. But actually she grew up in Canada. She was a child of poverty, but actually both parents are college professors. She's an intellectual, but she can't speak a complete sentence. She's like, she even dated Montel Williams. Montel Williams' his former girlfriend, his former side piece, is now the vice president. Really? Talk about clown world. The whole thing is insane. It's, again, one of those things no one ever says. It's like, no, I don't respect you. No, I'm not going to give you due deference because the office, you're degrading the office by your occupation of it. The whole thing, it's like the White House press secretary. The only reason she is there is to humiliate you as you watch it. The message of picking someone like Kamala Harris is our country is worthless, and we're going to put the dumbest, most transparently false person we possibly can in just to let you know that we have no respect for your country or your government at all. That's the whole point of it. And I don't want to play along. I'm like completely, no, you're not the vice. I don't care what you call yourself. Archbishop, Pope, you're not. You're a total loser. And you were put in there. I'm from California. I know how, there is no politics, there are no elections in California. It's a one-party state. The leadership picks the office and the unions vote for them, period. Period. So I got elected. No, you didn't. It's all a joke. And I'm not playing along. So I do hope they pick her, though, because she is totally incapable. I mean, I think I mean, in her defense, I do think she knows that she's dumb, which I actually see insecurity, and her insecurity is so obvious that it's palpable. I can smell it through the screen. That it makes me think a little more of her. The more dangerous variety is the White House press secretary, who's literally like almost subliterate, who is so brimming with self-esteem. It's a generational thing. But like telling the dumbest kids they're the smartest kids, some percentage believe it. And so she'll, without any trace of irony, describe herself as a historic figure. Yeah, but not in the way you think, trust me. But Kamala Harris, I think, to her credit, really knows that she's a complete fraud and imposter and really isn't qualified to babysit. And so if you got her on the national stage and just like with Trump, who's a freaking savage and can smell human weakness and he just gets blood on his tongue, I think it could be one of the greatest moments in American history. And I mean, I will say Jeb Bush, who is like not an evil man, or he's just a mediocre man, but Jeb Bush really thought he was going to be president. Jeb Bush has like never recovered. Like I mean it. And I mean, I'm a Christian, I'm trying not to take any pleasure in this, but I don't think his wife has talked to him since. I mean, he was so diminished by Trump. Trump basically sold him for a pack of cigarettes in the prison yard on TV. And Jeb is like a husk of a man ever since. And I don't think it's to Trump's credit that he really enjoyed that. He really did. He was like, I'll sell you again. And Jeb just like scampered off and cried or whatever. Anyway, yeah, Trump is, he's a hard man that way.
If not Harris, thoughts on Gavin or Michelle Obama as a nominee, and then they also want you to hear your thoughts on JFK Jr. or RFK Jr. and his impact on the race if he gets in.
Yeah, I mean, I think Newsom is the pick. Now, the literal among you would be like, wait a second, didn't they just spend 10 years telling me white men are bad? Or white men are bad, right? I mean, they created the country and everything in it, but they're still bad, they're evil. So you can't pick one, right? Oh, we have a white guy as president now who's lecturing us about white guys are bad, and like they could actually pick another white guy. So does their duplicity and soullessness have, any bottom, or is it just limitless? And I think it's limitless. They would pick anybody who was a handy vehicle for power, period. It doesn't matter at all. None of the race stuff, they don't believe any of that stuff. And shame on us for believing any of it. It's totally transactional. Like they don't have enough human feeling to even really care. They're not even really haters. They're just power worshipers, and whatever gives them power, they will do. And Newsom is very much like that. And Newsom is, I know him, not a genius, but he will literally say anything. And it's a rare person. I mean, polygraphs work. I know they're not admissible in court, but if you work for a big company, or certainly if you work for an intel agency or military or any sensitive stuff, they will polygraph you. Now, why do they do that? Polygraphs don't work. Yeah, okay, right. That's why everyone uses them. Oh, they definitely work. And they work because it is impossible for the overwhelming majority of people to lie without guilt. Totally impossible. In fact, there's a category for people who can. We call it a sociopath. And it's a pretty small, we throw that around. He's a sociopath. Not really. If I measured the sweat on his palm and his heart rate, I'd probably tell you if he was lying or not. Gavin Newsom, you couldn't. Gavin Newsom, say absolutely anything. Just absolutely anything. It does not matter. And people like that really freak me out because there's just no limit at all. And he's also very willing, because he has no limits, he's willing to use police powers to hurt his opponents. And he's done it in California to the extent that there are opponents. There aren't many left. He'll do absolutely whatever it takes. I think he's the scariest person by far. And there is a percentage of the population, he's handsome, that will believe him. I mean, the beauty of Joe Biden is he's self-discrediting. And of his vice president, I mean, they're a joke, and it's obvious. It's completely, no real person thinks they're like running the gap. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are running the federal government. The largest organization in human history. They're on it, they're running it. Okay. No one believes that. No one, literally no one. Democrats just vote for them because there's safety in numbers. The whole point of the Democratic Party is we're in this together, therefore we have more power. That's it. That's the organizing principle. There's no ideology whatsoever. Gavin Newsom, people will believe him, and I'd be extremely worried if he became president of the United States. And I don't say that. I'm not trying to be an overstatement guy, though obviously I fail quite a bit. But he's the one person who would scare me. He would put people in prison more than they're even doing now.
Kennedy and his impact on the race if he gets in?
Well, I'll just say I know Bobby Kennedy well, and I admire him. I don't agree with him on everything, but I think he's an honest person. I think he's right. I think he's just like Trump in this way. Bobby Kennedy's most controversial opinions are the truest ones. I believe that. It's funny, and Trump is exactly the same way. Build a wall was considered like completely outrageous. That's like the most obvious, and I don't just mean with Illinois, but like on our national borders. That was the most obvious observation. Oh, yeah, why wouldn't you have a wall? You know, we've paid for walls in a bunch of other countries around the world because borders make countries. It's very obvious. So yeah, Bobby Kennedy's an enormously brave person, and I happen to know a very decent person. Bobby Kennedy's an old-fashioned liberal of the kind I grew up with and always made fun of because, you know, the whole organic peanut butter, you know, unshaven armpit thing. But, you know, in middle age, I like organic peanut butter, actually, and I don't mind. I don't care if you shave your armpits, actually, sorry. What I care about is, like, living in a free society. And if your default is hurting people, whether it's babies or foreign populations, I'm not for that, actually. It's really easy to hurt people. It's really easy to destroy things. Super easy. What's hard is to build things. That's incremental. That can't be done in a day. And so, you know, I'm all for a strong national defense. I think we should defend ourselves against school nurses as well, as I told you. But anyone who gets too excited about cluster bombs, you're not my kind of person, actually. Sorry. I'm not into that, actually. I am a Christian, and I don't like it. I don't like all the people who get visibly aroused when they're talking about bombing civilian populations. I think it's disgusting. And so I do think there's an innate decency in him that I admire. And he's also, last thing I'll say, he's a true and sincere sportsman, and that's very meaningful to me. And the destruction of nature in the climate cult is one of the most upsetting things ever. I mean, in the end, the first thing I said about Wisconsin is it's beautiful, which it really is, and lightly populated in some parts. And the best part about America is America itself. It's just a beautiful country, and I've been around the world. This is a beautiful country physically. Our mountains, our water, our forests, and they're being destroyed. The forests are being clear-cut, for real, by the climate people to save the earth. They're cutting the forest down. What? Screwing up our food supply with ethanol. I mean, the whole thing is nuts. And I think sportsmen, people who hunt and fish and love animals, understand that. They actually care about God's creation, and he really does. He's a true sportsman. So anyway, I really like the guy. He could wreck it for Trump, obviously. And the people who tell you, well, he's a liberal, okay, I guess. But I'm the least liberal person I've ever met, and I kind of like him, so how liberal is he? You know, he wants a border wall, and he's totally for free speech, and he doesn't think that pharma is necessarily totally on our side, and et cetera. So how many people are actually choosing between voting for Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Joe Biden? None. The only people who are thinking about voting for Bobby Kennedy are potential Trump voters. So I don't know how he wound up running independent. I don't think he did it on purpose to hurt Trump. There may be people around him who steered him in that direction, is my suspicion, but I don't know that. But I think he's a huge problem, and I don't think the Trump people appreciate it at all. And their view is, I'm probably being way too candid. I'm assuming it's not being taped. But their assumption is, well, Bobby Kennedy said like crazy liberal things in the past. Yeah, he did. Well, I supported the Iraq War. I've had so many dumb opinions, I can't keep track of them all. But America has changed so much in the last 30 years that if your views haven't changed in 30 years, you're either dead or you're lying. So all of us have very different views if we're awake and honest than we used to have. So showing me some tape of Bobby Kennedy saying, you know, I hate gun owners or something. Well, Bobby Kennedy's a hunter, but for one thing, who do I think is more likely to take my guns? Joe Biden or Bobby Kennedy? Nikki Haley or Bobby Kennedy? It's not even close. Nikki Haley thinks all the guns should be at the DOD. Well, I think I should have some in my house too. She doesn't think that. So anyway, no one's going to believe that he's a Joe Biden-type liberal because he's just not. And so I think he's a massive threat to Trump, and I think they should wake up and deal with it somehow.
If he gets in, it's trouble for Trump.
Yeah, I mean, he has trouble with ballot access. I won't be boring, but it's hard for a third-party candidate to run.
Changing things up a little bit, your favorite interview that you've ever done?
I mean, I've interviewed people, every day for 32 years. So it's hard to, a lot of them, I mean, I've interviewed every person in the world. I mean, two that jump out that are not big interviews, but were cool for me is, the cool thing about interviewing people is you actually very often get your preconceptions confirmed. You're exactly who I thought you were, but sometimes they're totally overturned. And I have a friend who is actually a famous person, but is a great person, and he was bugging me, you gotta interview Mike Tyson. Okay. I don't like interviewing aging athletes anyway because it's kind of depressing. And aging boxers, please. He's like, no, Mike Tyson's really smart. Okay, yeah, okay. And so he finally bugged me enough. And so I interviewed Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson stayed at my house, actually, with his wife. And I had dinner with Mike Tyson in my backyard. And Mike Tyson is, legit smart. Not grading on a curve, just, objectively smart. A truly decent person, a really nice man, very religious person, and one of the most interesting people I've ever talked to in my life. And I only say that because I've interviewed a lot of interesting people, I've interviewed a lot of decent people, but I've never interviewed anyone who shocked me more than Mike Tyson. I just couldn't even believe it. I said to my wife, is that really Mike Tyson? And I've been friends with him ever since, and I love that. I love having my mind changed. I love learning that I was wrong. It's so exciting. But really the most memorable interview ever, this is such a small bore interview. I've done so many with crazy people, but very few with people who are blotto drunk on a set and also serving in Congress at the same time. And I had a guy called Jim Traficant who represented the Mahoning Valley in Ohio, who was a really interesting guy, amazing guy actually. Who in fact was sheriff of Youngstown and was indicted by the feds for corruption, for taking bribes, and defended himself in court and got himself acquitted. And did so on the following defense. The feds had everything on him, of course, as they always do. They tapped his phones and followed him, and he had taken all kinds of money. There was no disputing that, and including a new car. And his defense was, well, he was running a sting operation. Because Youngstown was that corrupt, and he couldn't trust any of his deputies to do this. He had to do it himself, because you don't know who you can trust. And so the prosecutor said, well, Sheriff Traficant, at this point you got a brand new Oldsmobile. Yes, I did. That's right. That was part of the sting. Did you tell your wife? And he goes, of course not. You don't know who you can trust here. And this is a very corrupt place. And he was acquitted. He was just a hilarious figure. So one night we had him on, and he was on his way to prison. Because the feds do get you in the end, by the way. I have noticed. I have a lot of friends who go into prison in the end. They do. You should run. Not any second guess about that. But anyway, they finally got him sent in prison. But right before they went to prison, I was working for CNN at the time. He came on the set. And he was just hammered. He was just drunk, absolutely drunk. And he was talking, but out of the corner of his eye, I could tell he was looking at something. And we had this woman who was our floor director, person directing the cameras, but she was a college student, CNN's super cheap, so they would have interns do the important jobs. And this girl was 19. And I'm not just saying this to seem virtuous. I'd never really noticed what she looked like, but she was cute. He became completely obsessed with her. Completely obsessed. I knew something was going on, but I didn't know what it was, because he'd look at me and he'd be looking off and share this really intense way. Finally, he just turned away from me and just stared at her in this really menacing sex criminal way, and then stood up on live TV and walked out of the shot and grabbed her and kissed her right in the middle of the show, and she screamed, and we had to go to commercial break. He started molesting the floor director, who was this poor girl, was a sophomore at GW. It was horrible. Anyway, he went right from there to Allenwood, where he served his term, and then came back to Ohio and was killed when his ride-on mower flipped over. Not many remember him, but I do.
Sadly, we are quickly running out of time, so I apologize.
I'm enjoying it.
I got so many questions. I'm going to finish on this. Any chance we'll be getting to see more of you leading up to the election, which I think means What's next for Tucker?
Well, most of our staff came with us from Fox, and I mean, really, pretty much all of them actually, and wonderful people, and we have the most cohesive show team really ever. We were, there for a long time, and no one ever left, and they're just wonderful people. So we've been working. There've been some, whatever, you have to deal with all this stuff whenever you get fired. I've been fired a lot, so I'm pretty good at it by this point. When I got canned, I called my wife. She was walking the dogs, and I said, "Wow, they just canceled the show." And she goes, "Why?" I said, "I don't know. They didn't tell me." She goes, "I'm so glad." She thought they were way too liberal. But anyway, so, sorry. That was her view, not mine. I officially have no view on that. But, so we've been doing interviews on Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, now known as X, for whatever reason. And that'll, be accelerating quite dramatically next month, right after Thanksgiving, first week of Thanksgiving.
Any chance we ever see you on network TV again?
I will never be on television again. And I can say that. I started in TV in 1995 during the OJ case. The OJ case! I was a magazine writer in D.C. and our reception, I came back from lunch and had a few drinks, and the receptionist goes, TV is so shallow, it's unbelievable. And she goes, CBS just called and they're looking for someone who's an expert on the OJ case. I knew nothing about the OJ case. I'm not interested at all. And I said, well, I'm kind of an expert, totally joking. She comes to my office, she's such a sweet girl. She comes back and she goes, actually, they want you in New York tonight to do a show called 48 Hours. And I was like, all right, free trip to New York, whatever. So I hopped on the shuttle, flew to New York, did the show, half in the bag, actually, and said some kind of stupid things about, the big picture. I didn't know any of the details. I was like, well, because I went to boarding school where you sort of learn how to BS your way through, class discussion. What were the axis powers, Carlson? You'd be like, so the thing about the axis powers, it's like an axis, right, around which a larger object spins. So I had those skills just from being, a lazy teenager. That is the one upside of boarding school. You learn to talk your way out of ignorance. And so I did that in 48 hours. And they're like, what do you think about OJ? What about the trial developers? And I was like, well, the thing about OJ, let's take 3 steps back, okay? Anyway, I get off the air and I get a call, and it was the CBS morning show. They're like, we thought you were really good. Can you stay for the morning show? Great. Had a few more drinks, got 2 hours of sleep, went out on the set, did CBS this morning. Thing about OJ is, okay, as a non-college graduate, let me give you my legal analysis. And so then I get back to Washington, and CNN calls, and they're like, could you come in this afternoon for this show, Inside Politics, which is something I actually did know a lot about. So I did it, and then I immediately got hired by CNN. It was the weirdest thing that ever happened to me. I'd never been on TV before. So it's almost 30 years of TV, and that's a lot. That's a lot. It's too much. It's not good for you at all. It's bad for your soul. And if I wasn't married to my high school girlfriend who hates TV, I probably would be a lot worse person than I am. Because in the 28 years I was on TV, we talked about TV precisely no times at the dinner table. None. And my family would just we never talked about my job one time. And no one in my family would ever acknowledge what I did for a living. No one was ever impressed. It would be like, wow, did you meet any famous people today? It would just be dead silence. No one would ever ask me what I did. The whole family was just we're not talking about your job. And so I'm kind of glad to get out of it. And obviously TV's in decline. I mean, obviously, who has a cable subscription, right? So I will say the only pitch I will make, I'm not a pitch guy at all, but is that Elon Musk, whatever you think of him, is legitimately dedicated to free speech, for real. And that really matters. First of all, you can't have a democracy without free speech. I don't know why no one says that. The defenders of democracy are trying to tell me I'm not allowed to say, well, that's hate speech. No, hate speech is speech you hate, and I actually don't care what you think of it. So your hate for my speech is totally irrelevant to me. Buzz off. And yet no one is defending that right. Literally no one except Elon Musk. And Elon Musk happens to have, and owns it personally, one of the biggest platforms in the world. And so that is a history-changing fact, because this election will be the only election in the past 2 cycles where we'll have a chance to find out what's actually happening. There will be a place where all sides can speak, and if you have information, millions of people can see it, and no one is going to censor you. That's unbelievable. I don't think that we've thought through what a big, because actually I don't think people my age ever imagined that we didn't have that. But since I worked in the business my whole life, I can tell you we absolutely did not have that. There were certain things that was like, whoa, you can't talk about that. It's absolutely crazy. I mean, this manifesto, did you see the manifesto that just came out from the shooting in Nashville? They suppressed that, because you're not allowed to know about the motives of the shooter, because those go against, I don't know, what, the policy goals of the Biden administration? Are you kidding? And that's one small, I could give you 1,000 examples. Literally, it's all I've done my whole life is watch this stuff. And I can promise you, most people have no idea what's going on in their own country. It's too big, 350 million people over a continent. People have no idea what's happening in America. And if they did, they'd freak out. And so now they have a place to learn what's happening in America, and that gives us a shot of democracy functioning. And it also, I mean, I would have just retired. I mean, I love bird hunting and fly fishing. I love my children. I love my dogs. I love my wife. I've got a couple more books I could write just for fun or whatever. But I'm very excited to go into this presidential cycle with a platform where I can say what I think is true. I could be wrong. I've been wrong many times before, for sure. But I will always be honest, and they will not censor me. That's like all I want in life.
And I know I speak for everyone here. We are excited to see that play out, especially in this upcoming presidential election. We can't wait to see what you have to say. We are looking forward to it. I know I'm going to be shot if I don't end it right now, so please join me in thanking Tucker for coming.
Thank you, Brett.
So glad. Thank you. Tucker Carlson.